It says we're recording. So, all right. Good evening, everybody. So this is Sean here from Dutchess County, along with Bob and your host for Targeted Topics this evening. We'll go ahead and we'll get started. So again, the purposes of this program, as always, is first off is just a forum for all of us to get together and share, best practices, best lessons learned, so on and so forth. So whether it's from safety considerations to coaching techniques, to, best ways of handling sponsors and fundraising, sharing upcoming events, so on and so forth, anything that basically affects the 4-H shooting sports community here in New York, that's what we're here to do. So the ground rules, as always, we just ask that you keep your mics muted during the course of the presentation, which should have automatically happened as you were entering the room. In the case that it didn't, just ask that at this time you please do so this way we don't get any back feeds or squeals or things like that. If you do have any questions, please go ahead, drop them in the chat, or just wait till we get to the Q&A period toward the back end of the program, approximately 30-35 minutes into the program or so. Right now, I just want to take a moment here. So a week and a half ago or so, we had the fall edition of the New York State 4-H Shooting Sports Championships. First and foremost, I want to make sure we extend a huge thank you to everyone who assisted in making it a success. Special thanks to Jane Rod, the 4-H director here in Dutchess County, and Emma Cron, who between the two of them made sure that we got the insurance, that they facilitated the registration portal and everything else that went with that. So a huge thank you to those two for making that happen in a big way. Also, Nate Paddock, who helped facilitate the air rifle portion of the program, and then also to everybody who assisted with that. And then, of course, to Donna Ringwall and John Bowe, who helped, and Bobby Staff, who helped on the archery side and made that part of the program a success as well. So big thank you to that. Bob, who else are we forgetting to thank here?
I think you got everybody. You had Tom Green, who did the statistics for us and all the calculations. He did a wonderful job. Thank you to him for that. That was a big help. And we had a lot of parents come out and just give us a hand. We had people come out and provide that free pasta dinner on a Saturday night after the day's shoot. So we want to thank them for all that hard work. And it was just a great event.
Yep. All right. And, anybody who wasn't mentioned, not that we're trying to neglect, but also, that list is long and distinguished. And, thank you especially for everybody who helped facilitated the Saturday night dinner. Again, huge thank you to everybody. Spring 2024 dates to be announced. We are looking to facilitate the small bore rifle of the program, which we were unfortunately unable to facilitate this month. Definitely looking to pull that off in the spring. Some more information to follow on that. I've already been pinged on people looking for dates for that. And then sometime May 2024, I do not believe the dates have been published for this, is when the spring portion of the championships will happen, where it's the shotgun, muzzleloader, and hunting. Looking ahead to targeted topics for October 23, TBD on what exactly we're going to be covering at that point. There's a chance some of us might be in Kentucky for the national training during that time frame, so more to follow. We may end, depending on how this all unfolds, we may end up also bumping it 1 week to the 24th. So just asking everybody to be flexible on that. Without further ado, Bob, I will turn it over for you to introduce our guest this evening.
Thank you, Sean. So we have a great speaker tonight. We have Emil Praslick, a retired Army veteran. I had the pleasure of serving with Emil in the Army. Emil was in the Ranger Regiment. He is most notably known for being a member of the Army Marksmanship Unit, as well as one of their coaches. During his time at the AMU and his other units, he's had multiple deployments around the world. And he is a world-class long-range shooter. He certainly is well known in those circles. So we're going to have a great opportunity to ask some questions tonight and have him impart some knowledge onto us. He currently works for a company named NAMO. He's under NAMO. The name of it is the Capstone Precision Group. They produce Lapua, Berger, and SK ammunition, which, those names should be pretty familiar to a lot of you out there listening tonight. And so he is in charge of their sales operations here in the United States. So again, has a lot of experience, whether it be shooting, ballistics, coaching, wind reading, you name it. Emil certainly is experienced with all those areas and is very well known. So I know once he gets on, he can speak to it. But I know he was on the team that I believe won the first of the King of the 2 Miles. I believe he did that with Brian Litz, is my recollection. So without further ado, Emil, I appreciate you coming on tonight and talking with us. And thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Sean. Um, yeah, I'm an old New Yorker. I started shooting. I started my competitive shooting career at Camp Smith in Peekskill, New York. I grew up in Brewster, so it's really nice to see all the work that you guys have done here on the program. It's really awesome. You're a force of nature, Bob. So it's great that these guys have a resource like you. So yeah, so I spent right around 19 years at the Army Marksmanship Unit. I retired about 7 years ago. And when I retired, I was the head coach of the service rifle team. So that's the NRA national match stuff, long range, plus lots of military type instruction. So what I thought I'd talk a little bit about tonight are kind of sort of the building blocks of beginning your journey as a competitive as a marksman. Um, and so I think before you learn how to pull the trigger or positions, the the biggest approach that the I guess the advantage of having a positive mental mindset helps every aspect of it. And so I'm a storyteller, so if I lapse into anecdote, it's hopefully to make a point. About a year before I retired, there's a high school just outside Fort Benning where I was stationed, where they have a shotgun team in Pine Mountain, Georgia, and a very very successful shotgun team. They would send kids to the Junior Olympics in trap, skeet, all that other stuff. And so every year they would have somebody from the AMU shotgun team. Those guys are good, Olympians, gold medals, the whole thing, come up and speak at their annual banquet. And those guys were all on a trip. And so the sergeant major called me up and said, "Hey, Praslick, can you go up there and talk to these guys at the banquet?" I'm like, "You think they want to hear from a rifle shooter?" So I go up there. I had nothing. I didn't really know what to expect. They're all in their suits, and I wore my dress blues and the whole thing. So after dinner, I really had no idea what I was going to say to these guys, a whole group of shotgun shooters. So I started off, and I think this is a worthwhile thing to say. I said, have you guys ever seen one of those Hallmark movie, after school movie, motivational movie where the plucky team of underdogs, the underachievers, they're like last place in the little league or the football the entire season, and through all kinds of adversity, a team of ne'er do wells, and all of a sudden the last game of the season, everything comes together and they manage to defeat the most powerful team, the New York Yankees of the league. The worst player on the team gets a home run and they win the game and they ride off into the sunset on the wings of glory. I said, "Has everybody seen a story like that?" Everyone's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "That never happens. That literally never happens." So the lesson that there is, you should never expect something from yourself in a competition that you cannot achieve in training. That is so you're only as good in a major match as your best practice day. And champions, the people that win matches, are the shooters that are able to really just shoot on the high end of their training average in a big match. So once you realize that that is a truth, then you can begin how to get to that point. So the basis of that is you have to build those basic skills of whatever it is. If it's free position, if it's air rifle standing, if it's air pistol, whatever it is, you have to build those individual skill sets, and you have to make a training plan in order to get there. So you say, this is where I want to get to, and then how do I get there? You plan out those individual steps. So one of the first things that we made new shooters do at the marksmanship unit, um, was write out what their process was of delivering a shot. So I would start macro, uh, like big picture. Okay, so the minute that your parents drop you off at the range, or you show up, you drive to the range, I want you to try to record every action that you take between unloading your kit, getting your shooting equipment on, getting your position on the firing what point, warming up, sighting in, everything, and to deliver that first shot. And then once you've delivered the first shot, what are you thinking about, and what are the physical actions that you have to take to deliver the next shot? And I would encourage them to be as expansive and as detailed as possible. If it takes you 147 steps, then write them all down. And by codifying all those actions, at least at first. Now, obviously, it's not a practical thing to follow a checklist, like you're starting up and PMCSing an F-35, right? But that's not a practical thing. But at the beginning of your journey, you have to isolate the things, the challenges that you're going to experience, and then figure out ways to mitigate and deal with those things. So after a while, all those secondary tasks, they start to become more, almost on autopilot. And then at the end, when it's time to deliver the shot, you get down to those vital few things that you know that you need to check. So for me, like I shoot now a lot of silhouette shooting, which is all standing. It's very difficult. Targets are small, a lot of movement. And so when I mount the rifle, I'm like, check my pressure in my firing hand, make sure that my trigger finger is positioned correctly on the trigger, make sure that I have a good head position, make sure I have pressure with my head on the stock. I'm checking for contact points of my non-firing elbow against my body. I'm checking that the butt is in the correct position in my shoulder, so that my head is in the correct position. My natural point of aim is set. All those little checks I can now accomplish in 3 or 4 seconds, or even while I'm taking like a couple of preparatory breaths before I get ready to release the shot. So that's the goal. The goal is to start with a really long list of everything that you need to do, and then distill it down to just those things that you really need to do, that you can do in the time frame in between each shot. And what that does for you is that it gives you a process to fall back on. Because if you're shooting, especially positional shooting, it should be classical music and not jazz. Okay, there really isn't a lot of room for improvisation up there. And so when the nerves come, when you acknowledge that you're at an event, and it's a big event, and there's no way to escape that knowledge. You have eyes and ears, the people that you haven't seen before. You see all the banners. It's obvious that you're at this event, national championships or state championships or whatever. So what keeps the demons away? What keeps the nerves away? That the process is what does that. So you can retreat back into your process and focus on every single shot. It's an easy thing to say. Take one shot at a time. You shouldn't be thinking about the shot ahead of the shot that you're going to take. You shouldn't be thinking about the shot that you shot 2 shots ago. You shouldn't be thinking about, okay, how many points am I down? You shouldn't be thinking about, okay, if I shoot all tens from here on out, I can shoot such and such score and I'll have a chance of winning. All those are thoughts that take you away from shot execution and performing your process. So you have to train with that process to bulletproof it so that when you're in the big match, you can retreat back into that. Um, while I was, they sent us up from Fort Benning to West Point to work at their Center for Enhanced Performance. At least that's what they were calling it at the time. And it's a mental management kind of a resource for the cadets. So the cadet athletes and even the cadet scholastically, they had all these psychiatrists and all these 100-pound brain civilians, and they had all kinds of really crazy equipment to try to help cadets focus and teach them mental management processes. And it took about a week, but the basic format was they subscribe to this theory that you can get into the zone while you're performing. And if you've ever played a sport or tennis, swung a tennis racket or played golf or anything, there are these moments when you could get into what they call the zone. Michael Jordan, one night when he hit like 60 something points, they asked him, well, what did it feel like? He's like, I felt like I couldn't miss. To me, the basket looked like it was 3 feet across. So what being in the zone means is you have kind of banished the sort of conscious act in your brain of like, okay, I'm doing step one. Okay, now I'm doing step two. Now I'm doing step three. It becomes a flow, right? So you get into a flow to where everything is almost on autopilot. So at that point, you've released your conscious brain and you're now operating on subconscious. All those skill sets that you've trained and those processes, they're flowing naturally. And you're not letting your sort of conscious brain get in the way. So they had some exercises to do, but the thing that we found that was the most useful out of all that training was developing a self-talk before the match. And that it varied based on everybody, and it varied based on everybody's personality. In our shooting sports, it's the whole I've read With Winning in Mind and all these other mental management books, and they all they all kind of had the same thing. You have to get to a place where you're sort of quiet, focused, and contemplative. But the problem with that approach sometimes is, you never know when someone's going to pull you out of your sort of Zen state. Something happens with your rifle, something happens with one of the officials at the match, a fellow competitor, is making a lot of noise, somebody drops a chair in the background, and all of a sudden you're out of your perfect mental state. So you have to figure out what it takes to get you so that your brain is primed to go into that sort of flow mental state. For me, it was positive affirmation talk. So I would write down sort of key phrases and I would sort of say these things to myself. Music helps. I would choose, some different types of music, not that would necessarily relax me, because I found with my personality type, I'm not sure if I'm a type A, but I have a very active mind. My mind's always thinking of something. So for me to get really laser focused, I had to feel aggression. Not hate, not anger, but aggression. I had to be like super hyper focused on every aspect. So I would imagine that my eyesight was getting better. I would imagine that my hearing was getting better. I'm looking at every single detail on my rifle, and like that would like maybe made me hyper aware, and that would like prime me to where I could zone in on my tasks and kind of let the rest of the world go away. Some people can be super calm. If that's your normal state, if a person's calm, if they're a quiet person, like that approach of just zoning out, looking up at the sky, and like, hey man, that cloud looks like a rabbit, and like now you're totally chill and you can go and shoot. But for me anyway, my brain type just wouldn't ever let me do that. I would try to relax and try to clear my mind, and then the demons would come back in the mind. They come in through the back door. So the only way to keep them out and keep my mental state totally hyper focused on my tasks was to feel aggression. I would do things like I would pick a competitor at random and like put like, hey man, I'm going to destroy this person. You never say that to anybody. You feel that internally. That would give me focus. You don't ever say that or represent that, physically, because that's bad sportsmanship. But inside your brain, you can be absolutely cutthroat. And sometimes some of the nicest shooters, if you ask them what they're thinking about going to a match, they're thinking about taking your head off. Like the level of aggression of some of the most quiet, nicest people you've ever met. But when they're competing, when they're shooting, they want to destroy everybody else out there. And that lets them focus on it. Not in a way where you're have actual animosity or anything, but you using that as a constructive tool to maintain your focus. So that's kind of the first type of thing that I would kind of focus on when people are beginning their sort of marksmanship journey, or if they're like stalling and they're having those issues of like mental management issue problems during matches. You have to kind of deconstruct what your shot process looks like, and then what does it take for you to get into the flow. You can do forms of self hypnosis. A lot of times music helps. That self talk thing helps a lot. And your brain sometimes will feel surprised if you're doing really well and you haven't done well before. I used to see it happen all the time when I was coaching in the Army. You'd have a guy who was, winning the match, who was, on the verge of winning, and all of a sudden you could see it happen. He'd realize he's in the lead, and then you'd see him just completely fall apart. Right. So, there's a saying that to win a match, you have to have already won a match. So, it definitely is easier to win competitions after you've already won, because essentially your brain isn't surprised that you're dealing well. Like we've all felt the feeling you shot like 18 or 19 tens in a row. And on the 20th shot, you start thinking about that shot. So that is one thing about Lanny Basham's approach that I think is very good. We used to take these like index cards, 3x5 cards, and we put them all over the office, and we put super high scores on the cards. And it sounds simplistic, but the more your eye and your brain sees, like 100 with 9x, 100 with 8x, or like an air rifle, like, a 629.5 or whatever, the more you see those scores, you actually start to associate normalcy with those scores. Not like, oh my God, that is a crazy score, I could never shoot it. You start telling your brain that you're capable of shooting those scores, and that there's nothing uncommon at all in that level of performance. So that when you get to that point in shooting, it's not a surprise to you, and your brain and your body doesn't have that sort of adrenalized reaction to success. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. At that point, you're not gonna do it. Spoiler alert, it's not gonna happen for you. So you have to try to do as many things as you can to insulate yourself and develop those sort of habits that of excellence. And so maintain positivity in training. So I'll talk a little bit about how to set up training and develop training. Um, when I first started shooting, I did like everybody else did. I wanted to learn how to shoot an array high power across the course. So what did I do? I would go and I would shoot a full course of fire. Then the next time I would go shoot another full course of fire. And I got better, but it really was really slow. And then I learned by watching some of the experienced shooters, we would break down the discipline into like smaller segments. So we would do things like a one shot drill or a two shot drill, these things to where you're sort of taking little tiny bites of the apple. We would do exercises where we would get up, get back down, get our NPA, sight in on the target, close our eyes, and then even like sit there with our eyes closed for like 30 seconds and then shoot a shot. wherever you were committed, wherever your position puts you, after 30 seconds, you opened your eyes and you just fired the shot. And you realize, wow, okay, I didn't really have a natural point of aim. I have tension in my position in my left hand. My sling, I need to rotate my sling, kind of outward, half an inch or a quarter inch. I need to shorten my sling. I need to move my hand stop. All these little things. You can really only identify them if you take your time and you break down each event into smaller subsets of that task. And it can be tedious. All the training doesn't need to be like that, but your training needs to be organized around breaking down those subsets. And that's one thing. Like as far as resources, the CMP has lots of great marksmanship guides. The AMU, these guys were small bore and three position and air rifle. That's their bread and butter. They would have all these exercises. I mean, and sometimes taking all the way back to basics to like reinforce a basic skill set. We had a coach, Rick Hawkins, who was the coach of the international rifle team. He shot at the AMU. He was a Pan American Games, gold medalist and World Cup. He shows up. He's got Olympians on the Army rifle team, at the international rifle guys. He's got a handful of Olympians who are already on the team. What does he do? He takes everybody's rear sight off of the gun. He says, okay, we're going to shoot a 10-shot exercise at 50 feet with no rear sight. And we're just going to try to shoot groups on a target, just a black bull target on a target on a big piece of paper. Guys are like, what? That's bananas. Why would I do that? So what he was trying to do was he was trying to address, because he had observed some guys, even though they had their cheek piece set, while they were in position, they were still moving their head around a little bit. So their rifles were not set up so that their eyesight alignment wasn't perfect. It wasn't supported by the equipment. The guys had not taken the time to actually adjust their cheek piece, adjust their butt plate, all the things to have it be perfect every shot. So it's like, if you can't shoot a group without the rear sight, that means you don't have a good head position. And they were super skeptical. One guy even went to the sergeant major to complain about the coach. It was hilarious. But you don't do that type of training all the time. But those are the types of things that you got to be creative and find the things that will isolate the skill sets. We used to do another exercise. It was a blank piece of paper drill. And this actually came from the free pistol, the international pistol guys. They would put a blank piece of paper up at 10 meters, and you would shoot groups at the center of the blank piece of paper with no aiming mark at all, no aiming bowl, no bullseye, anything. Because the point of that exercise was sight alignment only. Because with a pistol, you have to focus on the front sight, and you cannot align the sights unless you're focusing on the front sight. So the target was more or less a distraction, because shooters were staring at the target. They were looking over their sight. So they didn't have their eye focused on the front sight. They were losing sight alignment, minor sight alignment errors, and they didn't even know it. So we did this exercise on a blank piece of paper. And at first the groups were big. And then after a while, guys were shooting groups smaller than the 10 ring on a blank piece of paper, right in the middle. And then we put the targets back up, and everybody's groups were better. Everybody. And that was actually, Bob, something we would do with soldiers. We would do a train the trainer with soldiers who couldn't qualify. So our AMU commander would send us down to Fort Eustis to work with the Army boat drivers because they couldn't qualify. And we actually did a blank paper drill on the guys with M16A2s. And we bring them back to the zero range, and all of a sudden the guys were shooting little tiny groups on the zero target. So, and there's lots of those sort of creative exercises. And now, with modern technology, we have these training devices. There's scats and other types of devices where you actually can look at your hold. You can use these diagnostic tools and really break down. I can't really sit here and tell you what the perfect small bore standing position looks like. I'm good at shooting, but I'm probably not the best subject matter expert to tell you, like a Lucas Kaczynski, or get, one of these guys that's an Olympian to come up and tell you, okay, the best way to do it is you take your left foot and he's the left foot's like this, right foot's like that. Got to move your, like, those examples exist, but you have to be able to figure out, look at the position, and then figure out, how do I get there? How do I? It's kind of like during land navigation. If I'm trying to find a point, and I'm what I really need to do is make my approach to that point through the woods with my map and compass, so that if there's a big river behind my point, I know that if I made a mistake and I missed my point, I hit the river and I don't go beyond it, and I don't get lost and I have to call a helicopter to find me. I took the same approach to training marksmanship, training our shooters. So how do you know if your position is wrong? So identify some of those key tasks to make sure that that you're not doing it wrong, that you're identifying those things that your checklist, again, going back to your process. So, and then here's a thing that you find a lot with sort of self-taught shooters. Bob and Sean and I were talking about this before the call started. There's really only a couple of ways to do this, right? If your position looks completely different than the guy or the girl that's winning the national championships, or is medaling at the Junior Olympics, or all the shooters. If you look at the Olympic selection match and you look down the line at all the shooters' position and standing or kneeling or prone, with a couple of differences, they all basically look the same. So you should start your position by following good examples. Even if it's not comfortable, you should find a way to get into that position, because they're based on solid found principles of natural body position, bone support, muscular relaxation, all those things. So there really isn't anything more valuable than a mentor, or at least a role model. So I would, I'm kind of short and, wider now, way wider now than I used to be. I'm genetically engineered to be like kind of squatting over in a peat bog somewhere in like Eastern Europe. That's my lineage. I'm like a long, tall, skinny guy. But I would look at pictures of like Lona Zwigger, who was kind of built like me. When our tall, skinny guys would look at pictures of like Lanny Bashan, tall, skinny guy. Female shooters would look at like the top female shooters, and you look at those positions as examples, and then you try to get yourself into those positions. It really does shorten the curve for improvement. We would get shooters all the time. We had kind of a policy at the Army Marksmanship Unit where we always tried to bring in soldiers from outside the unit, at least for a couple of months, if we could get them away from their command and get some shooting experience, then send them back out to the Army. So we would frequently get guys from like the Rangers or Green Berets or whoever, who could get a couple of months off and come and shoot with us. And so these guys had never shot anything competitive before. And within 3 or 4 months of just shooting with the AMU, we'd go to matches and they were already better than almost all the civilians that we were shooting against. And the civilians were like, "Hey man, how long have you been shooting?" And I would tell them, like, "Hey man, don't make these guys feel bad. Go ahead and tell them a couple of years, because otherwise you're going to demoralize these guys." But the reason why they got so good so fast was because they were only around people that were doing it right. And that is a huge, huge, huge tool to utilize. So look at people that are successful, copy their behavior, copy their habits, especially on the mental game and on the performance side, like your reaction to adversity or your reaction to success. I would like to see one of my shooters, whether they just shot a perfect score or they shot one of the worst scores they'd ever shot. I really don't want to see any change in their outward demeanor. I don't want to see them throwing their gear on the ground. I don't want to see them dragging their rifle off the line. It's like that old thing in the military, fake motivation leads to real motivation. right? So fake it till you make it. So your outward physical appearance and demeanor can 100% affect your mental state. Instead of like having sad face and kicking the dirt, force yourself to remain positive, force yourself to smile, force yourself to be polite, force yourself after the match, even if you shot poorly, don't go and hide. Don't go and sit behind the bleachers. Don't go and sit in your car, and try to be by yourself. Process what happened, process what was right and wrong, talk to other competitors, because the more you focus on the sort of the negative aspects of how your shooting event went, the more you're reinforcing those negative lessons. So be positive. And I know we want to get to questions and stuff if we have questions. The last kind of sort of general topic I want to talk about is sort of team dynamics. So, you guys are probably going to be shooting as part of a team. You go to a match and you're part of a group of shooters at a match. It is worth real points to function and have a sort of a sense of esprit de corps amongst your teammates. Lift each other up, celebrate successes, and so I would kind of refer to it as like closing the velvet ropes. So when our team went somewhere, we always stayed together. We kind of like sat in our own little group. So you're maintaining the same sort of social group that you have when you're training. This helps set up your brain to say, hey, man, it's just like another training day. I'm right next to my shooting buddy. Oh, yeah, Sally's over there. John's over there. You're having the same types of conversations. So you go to these big matches, don't go and separate and go all by yourself. Stay in your group. Use the strength of your group, use the strength of your team as a force multiplier. It is worth real points to do that. And it's inevitable that you guys are going to be competitive with each other. Everybody wants to win. Even though you're teammates, somebody's got to win, right? So I kind of had a moratorium against talking about scores at a match. It's like that thing in school. It's the kid that asks you what you got on your test. The only reason they're asking is because they think that they beat you on the test, right? So you get a lot of that. So what I would do is I would find a way for the shooters to kind of like release the tension and be able to talk about performance in a way that didn't really cross the barrier about talking about scores, because sometimes that could be really personal. Hey man, what'd you shoot? Well, I had a 595. What would you have? Well, I had a 571. Oh man, really? That? So what I would do is, we would have a competition in our team. Just an example. Nobody has to do this, but an example of how to keep that sort of team dynamic going, even at a competition match. I would say, okay, guys, we would have a separate award for whoever shot the most X's. I don't care what the score was. But if you didn't win the match, but you had the most X's of anybody, we actually had a trophy. We made a trophy. We had a little book of everybody that won the trophy at every match. And we actually made a huge deal out of it. So it got to the point where guys, honestly, were more focused on winning the X trophy than actually winning the match. But guess what happens if you're just trying to shoot X's? You end up shooting more tens. So it was a way for me to keep my guys focused on shooting center shots and not get fixated on the score itself. So you could shoot a 9, you could shoot an 8, you could shoot a 7, but like, man, I got to make my next one an X. And it really made like losing points wasn't like a cut in the wrist. You know what I mean? It wasn't like death by 1,000 cuts. You didn't feel like physically wounded every time you dropped the point, because I was only focused on shooting center shots. So like, hey, I don't care. I want how many 10.5s or better can I shoot? That's all I'm here for, man. I don't care how many 9s, whatever it is. If I can shoot 20% of my shots 10.5 or better, then I'm shooting in the middle, right? So it's a way to keep the focus in there. And then, you celebrate that internally among the team for sure. and you try to take the sting out of somebody that. And here's the last thing I'll say about team stuff. If one of your teammates isn't shooting well and you see them start to drift off by themselves, you cannot allow that. You've got to reel that teammate back in and build them back up. Do not let them go off by themselves and just go, oh man, I'm letting the team down or let myself down. You pull them back in and you share your own story about, oh man, you think that's bad? Remember that one time? Man, I couldn't even get off the range of that. I thought I should have shot the light fixture. I would have had a better, so you pull the teammates in and you keep everyone together. And that in the aggregate is worth real points to your score. As my old man used to say, that's folding money, right? So I guess, I know I kind of rambled, but I tried to hit some of the main points about, preparing yourself mentally, um, maintain a positive mindset, breaking down your shot process into small steps. How do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. Um, trying to try to get yourself in a position to where you can get into that flow, the things that Lanny Basham talks about, that elite athletes talk about. So you got to be your brain has to be primed to get into that position. And not, then there's other things that also, diet and sleep and all those other things. You're being proactive. If you're taking concrete steps to help your performance, whether it's physical fitness or diet or whatever, you're actually helping your mental position because you're being proactive because you're focusing on success. So I guess that's about all I have, Bob, for like my, stream of consciousness. If you want to zero in on something else or ask any other questions, I'm here for you.
Well, no, that was great. Certainly the positive mental mindset, another key one that you touched on, which we'll work on with the kids, and I'll definitely develop with the instructors, is a training plan. So you got to have a training plan, and how you perform is what drives your training plan.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you have to look at your performance and you have to break down your weaknesses, and that's what you do for your training plan. And that's where, honestly, your sort of resident athletes at the OTC, your AMU guys, that's where those guys come in. You're like, hey man, what's a sample training plan? I remember one time, Matt Emmons, one of the best marksmen America's ever produced. He was not an AMU guy. He was a resident athlete at the OTC in Colorado Springs. So they were like, hey, man, what do you shoot every day? He sent his training plan back to the guys at Fort Benning, and they thought that he was messing with them because Matt shot a 60-shot air rifle match. Then he shot a 3-position 3x40, and then he shot 60 shots prone every day for like 4 days a week. Then he took one day where he just shot whatever he wanted to shoot. And they were like, there's no way this dude shoots this much. He's just, he's trying to like psych us out or something like that. But every shooter is going to have a different approach to how they train. It's you're best served to get like, a really full spectrum of different types of training plans. I can help with that. I can ask, one of my colleagues at work here is Shane Barnhart. He retired from the marksmanship unit as well. I think he's like 8 or 9-time NRA national small bore champion. I'll talk to Shane about, how he would prepare. And there's a real thing about peaking as well. You don't want to shoot the match before the match. So, and every shooter has it's different almost for every shooter. So you could build those skill sets. And then I always found my guys shot better if we gave them like a couple of weeks off or a week off, or they did almost no shooting before a big competition. That way their brain was refreshed and they could really approach it with, everything really being hyper focused. You don't really want to like go right from a heavy training day and the next day shoot a match, because like, it's a mental endurance thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly having great coaches with a lot of experience is super helpful. I mean, for the audience out there and whoever's going to watch this after the fact, Emil probably doesn't remember this, but I was shooting at a range with him. It was your father's range up in Dutchess County, and it was a few of us there with you. And I remember you looking over at that an individual who will remain nameless, but you said to him, he goes, "I have a little advice for you. Press the trigger. I'm sorry, pull the trigger, not the gun." And I sat there and I just broke that down in my mind, what you were saying to him. And I said, boy, it really is that simple, specific on trigger pull.
Really
Pull
is.
the trigger, not the gun. So that's one that you've equipped me with for life from that point forward, that I certainly impart on other kids. So it's key for us to learn a lot of these coaching tips, techniques from people like yourself, so that we can pass it on to become better teachers and mentors for these young adults coming up, to make them, some of them are not going to go for these Olympic type sports or NRA or CMP events, but we just want to make them super competent, confident, marksmen, like you're talking about, and shooters with firearms. So it's,
Yeah.
it's important to get that information. But Sean, do we have any questions in the box?
Actually, one just popped. So Kieran's asking, what was your most memorable competition?
Well, there's really two. So, when I first came to the Army Marksmanship Unit, my first year, we had this really important competition that was called the Inter-Service Championship. So it's all the service teams. There's the Marine Corps Rifle Team and the Army Rifle Team and the Navy team, the Air Force team, the National Guard team, the Army Reserve team. It was at Quantico, Virginia, and it's a huge deal between the services. Inter-service rivalry is a huge thing, and it is a if you win that match, the individual championships, it is kind of like a career milestone as a shooter, at least at the AMU. And it was my very first year on the team, and I 100%. I've never really won a big match before, and so I was just having an above average day. But we had all these thoroughbreds on the AMU at the time, guys that were shooting monster scores every day. So I was like, I just want to stay within myself. I want to just try to shoot my average. And going into it's a 2-day match. Going to the second day, someone comes up to me before the last stage, 600 yards, and says, "Emil, you're tied for the lead with so and so." And the guy I was tied with was like a 7-time national champion. And I'm like, "What?"
No
Like,
pressure.
"Yeah, man." Yeah, I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, dude, for real. You're down so and such and such points. Everybody else, had a bad stage. You're exactly tied. You have the same amount of points, same amount of X's going to the final match of 600 yards." And so then it hit me. The enormity of the situation hit me. And I went into the woods and threw up. I was like, all of a sudden, I got nauseous. It was a hot day, so I drank a bunch of Gatorade. I get all of a sudden, oh my God, I'm gonna throw up. I went in the woods, I threw up. I got back in line. I'm all sweaty, and I laid down, and my hold, everything was moving, and I managed to I'm like, okay, listen, all I have to do, I've already made it this far. So no matter what happens, I've already achieved my goal. I've shown everyone on the team that I'm a good shooter. I was a good hire, and I just focus on every shot, every single individual shot, even though they weren't all in the middle. So after the match, I dropped like 2 points. I'm like, well, clearly, Grant Singley, he clearly shot a perfect score because the conditions weren't that bad. So I get up and I'm, take my sling off my rifle. I'm getting ready to walk over to shake his hand, and I just get mobbed by everybody. Like, "You won!" And then it was a complete shock to me, a complete shock. I couldn't even believe that I had won the match. And then after that, everything got so much easier because I had proven to myself that I could win a major competition match. It wasn't just something I'd read about other people doing. It happened to me. I was never really a thoroughbred. I shot pretty well in all the positions. And so I was always close to winning, but I was never a guy that would just shoot a perfect score in one sort of position. So that was one. And the second one was my first world championships in England in 2003, the World Long Range Championships for the Palma team. And I thought, yeah, I'm an experienced U.S. Army shooter. I've shot hundreds of team matches, and we get to the World Championship team match, and I look down and I saw the American flag on my shirt, and I look around me and I see the team from England and Australia and New Zealand and Canada and South Africa, and I'm looking around me, and all of a sudden the enormity of it hit me, and my heart started racing and beating, and again I had to pull myself back in to like what I was actually doing, So, um, you know, but what I found was if once you embrace the moment and use it, it makes you an even stronger shooter. Like, don't be scared of a high profile event. Go, yeah, man, this is awesome. I'm at the freaking world championships. And then you use that as like, as Bobby Boucher would say, use it as tackling fuel. Use it to really focus yourself. Embrace the moment.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So do we have any other questions, Sean? Anybody want to pop on and ask a question versus send it in the box?
Well, I don't have any additional questions at this point in the box, but just a quick comment. Just kind of following along with my notes, which are quite extensive this evening. One, I think my first observation ties into, for anybody who's going to be seeing this afterward, back to our episode back in July where we had Rachel Praddock on, who had done the Junior Olympics, and just, especially on the mental preparation and the mental discipline aspect of our discussion this evening, just how much similarities there was to what Rachel shared with us in terms of just that prior mental preparation going into any sort of competition and working that as part of your train up routine. So really the significance of that, but also, I thought it was kind of interesting because the first time I ever saw the target back or the blank piece of paper exercise was actually, Bob, when we first started doing this 4-H rifle discipline together back in 2013, 2014, whenever that was now.
Mhm.
And, so to hear Emil share with us, just how important a tool that is in our toolboxes as trainers here in 4-H, to really focus, on the sight alignment aspect of what we're trying to teach as a skill set, I thought was pretty cool. And just kind of drove home to me, just how much what Emil shared with us tonight really has some good crossover with what we already have within the 4-H curriculum, but also how we can use that and develop that and build upon that to make it even a better product at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, like preparation mentally for a match, visualization, and all these tools, they are really really effective. You know, Imagining that perfect shot. There is a story and from the 60s where there was a Navy shooter that made one of the Olympic teams. And he was a pistol shooter, he was like a free pistol shooter. And he did not have access to his competition pistol. He was like on a boat. Like, but you do, he was on like an aircraft carrier for like 9 months. He had to come back and they had the Olympic selection match. And what this guy did was he laid in his bunk every night and he closed his eyes and he went through every single step, cocking his pistol, loading the cartridge, taking his stance, seeing the sights in his mind's eye, pressing trigger control, keeping the sights aligned, firing. He'd see the shot, he'd take the pistol down. So he mentally, visually, he imagined going through a 60 shot match. He did that every night for like 9 months at sea. And when that guy came back without touching a pistol, he actually shot the best score he'd ever shot in the selection match. And it was just by visualization. And you can see that it is a unbelievably powerful, but it takes a lot of discipline. Close your eyes sometime and try to go through even shooting like one shot without letting some stray thought come in, like, man, did I take the garbage out last night? Or, whatever it is. But like, did I leave the stove on? Like, with keeping those thoughts out, it is a really awesome exercise in mental discipline, and it will help you.
And interesting you brought up to, shadow someone doing something right, such as position. So I went to the CMP rifle camp earlier this year, which was hosted out in Perry Central School District out in Wyoming County in New York. And it was an awesome week that I got to spend down there. And there was a young girl there shooting. I think she was from Buffalo. There's many kids shooting, but this one girl, she was just awesome. And a whole bunch of them were awesome. But I mean, she was only dropping like 2 or 3 points, on these matches. And phenomenal shooter. So I said, okay, I need to watch and see what she's doing. And it was so interesting to watch her because her mindset, like you're talking about, and her approach to get her into her zone was so specific. Once I watched it like 3 or 4 times, I could tell you what it was going to be next because she was so precise and exactly how she did it. And it worked. So, I mean, that's key there, for the coaches out there and the mentors and our instructors, is that we got to have somebody that's doing it right. And then you use that individual who's doing it right as an example. And you can't be afraid to take a kid that's having a hard time off the line, say, hey, your position is this. You keep sitting on your foot or whatever it is. This is what it needs to look like. I mean, that, you can't say enough about that. That's for sure.
We
I
have
think the other.
Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you. I think the other thing that's really important here, that's kind of just jumping out at me this evening as another takeaway is, all these little things that we're talking about here. When you take that step back and you apply it to the big world, whether it's surrounding yourself with successful people in a particular area in order to become more successful. I mean, that is just a skill set that is applicable to anything you do in life, really. I mean, yes, we're talking about it in a shooting sports context, but if you want to get better, at math, surround yourself with, better people who can do math really well, and you will rise to the occasion. And, so many of these basic skill sets that we're working with these 4-Hers really are so much applicable outside of the 4-H shooting sports context. And I think that's one of the things that, especially for the people who see this afterwards, that's really, for me, I think the big blinking red light this evening in what we're talking about here, as pulling that forward into the future, as you work on developing whatever that skill set is, not just in the shooting sports context. I just wanted to jump that in there.
Yeah, he I think you captured it, Emil. Copy habits and behaviors of champions. Those people doing the right thing every time. So
we have just one really quick anecdote about sort of mental preparation. We sponsor some athletes in my company. So we have Lapua sponsored shooters. We have SK sponsored shooters. So we have a shooter that we sponsor, an SK, who's a national champion in silhouette. And I shoot with him all the time. He's an unbelievable shooter. But one of his things is right before his shot process, he has one thing that he does to activate his mind to deliver the shot. So he'll mount the rifle. He'll and he's told me what his process is. I blink 3 times and I cough, little cough like that, and that's his signal that he can laser in and focus. Because you can't maintain that focus indefinitely. You'll just lose it. So you have to have a mechanism to turn it on and then allow yourself to relax and turn it off. So when you come off the line, you could be a human being and talk to your friends and laugh. But you have to find a way to signal to yourself that it's time to laser in and focus again. And for him, it was a little cough. So a really, really interesting way of like priming the pump so that you're ready to for peak performance.
Mm-hmm. That's develop your process. That's key. So these are some great takeaways that we're going to be able to share with other instructors. Emil, we can't thank you enough for setting aside an hour for us tonight. I know you're a busy man. We do pride ourselves. I do have SK ammunition. We use that for our competitions. When we get close to the competitions, that's when we transition over to that. It's a little more expensive, but at the end of the day, that stuff makes the difference. The ammunition really does, versus the standard ammunition that we shoot federal, which is pretty good, but it's not. SK is very good in comparison.
It is very good ammunition. As a matter of fact, there are times when there's some lots of SK rifle match that shoots better in my rifle than Midas Plus or Center X. So SK is probably the best value for performance that there is. That's me with my little industry hat on, Bob. I had to do a little bit of salesmanship.
Oh, it's all good. So do we have any other questions in the box, Sean, there or anything?
No, but I've got the thank yous coming in for what Emil had to share with us tonight, which I had to admit I actually learned a lot too. So, and I know I don't know everything. So
that's something coming from an officer. So great job, Sean.
you had to throw that in there, didn't you?
Outstanding, Emil, like a true NCO. I love it. Outstanding.
Yeah,
Outstanding.
that's a punch
One
to the
last
kid.
thing is, I'm the only Emil Praslick on planet Earth that's on Facebook. So if anybody has a question, I'm an open book. Bob has my contact info. I'm happy to help. I'm an open book. I'm happy to answer any question or at least direct somebody to a resource if I don't have the answer. So don't hesitate to reach out if you guys want to ask me a question directly.
So we do have one request that if you do get up here to visit your family, Emil, and something's going on, we promise this. If you come up and have a little talk and a little training session with the kids, and we won't keep you long, we promise to bring you back to Jenks Barracks and fry a really good Black Angus steak that was, grown right here in New York State. So
okay, sounds like a deal. I go back at least once a year to see my mom. She still lives there in Brewster, so sure, no problem at all.
Yeah, well, again, Emil, thank you so much for doing this for us tonight. Sean, thank you for setting this up, and for the 4-H instructors out there, any of your great ideas or suggestions for further targeted topics, please bring them to our attention, and we'll get that going. Hopefully, Sean and I will be teaching down at the national training at the University of Kentucky. The level 3 rifle is what we're going to go attempt to achieve this time. So we have some level 3 experience in the state, and we hope to bring you some of that information and maybe a targeted topics from there. So again, just to expand our experience and, make the shooting sports better. But again, Emil, thank you so much. Safe travels, and thank you for giving us this time.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Thanks, Sean. All right, good luck, everyone.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it.
That was great, guys. I really appreciate everybody zooming in tonight. Again, we've got more hits after the fact, correct, Sean, than who actually dial into these.
That's generally the trend, but yeah, no, that's about what it looks like.
Yep. So he's a real resource that he means it. When he means call me with questions, he means it. So he is 100% behind youth shooting sports, and loves what we're doing with the kids and wants to help support us in any way that he can. So I think that about wraps this one up, right, Sean?
Okay.
Yes, it does. So again, October 17th is our projected next one. Again, the emails will be going out ahead of time to remind everybody. So that's all we have for this evening. So I'll be ending the recording here momentarily. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us.
Outstanding.
Okay.